see what's happening, but we're getting the props. And then inside our toolbar button that we have inside of the render prop, we can add an onClick event onto that, and then pass props dot open to it. And I will just show what the expected result at the end is, and then we can talk more about what's happening. But now you can see that I still only have that edit button, but once I click that, I get the media upload component that fills the entire screen. And so all I'm doing is I'm telling the media upload component that, hey, render this button, and it tells us, hey, or it gives us a function that we can call to actually open the media library. And so that's what this render prop does. It just renders the button to open the media library. But we can now select another image and see that we're able to change out, switch the image that we want to have displayed there. How do you feel about that so far? Did that make sense in regards to how to get something up into the toolbar, how to work with the media upload component, and just those things?
I have a question.
Sure.
How to add a name to the buttons? Because right now I believe it's not accessible.
Yeah, that is one more thing that for the toolbar button. When we look at the there and go into the packages for the components, and in the source, it's the toolbar button, and yeah, it's the button. The toolbar button itself uses just the button with some additional styling, and so all of the different properties for the button will apply here. And we can do a couple of things. We can either, instead of closing it directly, toolbar button and some text in here. And that way, yeah, it auto-closed the toolbar button down there. Yeah, that is something the autocomplete index code now over here, but I will. And now that is way too large. That is, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is something that is currently, there's also both the problem with accessibility and then with...
But I can add, for example, area labels.
Yeah, of course, you can add the area labels for it, you can add all of your additional props to it. And there's currently, if you look at the image and have an image in there, and if you, on the other hand, look at the media text, they are using multiple different, the media text still uses the pencil, this one uses that icon, and that is something that when you're using Gutenberg, the plugin, so the newest version of things, they have consolidated all of that into a media replace flow component that instead of having the raw toolbar button here, is using another component that automatically has the media upload, all of that integrated into it. And also, one of the reasons why they did that is for accessibility. But when you're still using the raw toolbar button, you can add your area labels, you can add all of those things. Cool. So the next thing that we want to tackle is just working with inner blocks, so adding something to our content down here. And the concept of inner blocks, if you ever worked with the media text component, for example, where you have just an image and then you have some content that you can add your own blocks in there. And that is what we want to have for our own block. It doesn't really make sense to restrict it too far to hard code all the functionality that, for example, the title block that we could use in there, hard code that ourselves. It makes sense to just use other blocks within our block. And the way we do that is, again, by using another component, again from the block editor. In this case, it's called inner blocks. And we can just, inside of our card body here, use the inner blocks. And inside of our save, in the same spot, use innerblocks.content. And just by adding those two things, the inner blocks up here in the edit and the innerblocks.content in the save, when we go back in the editor, we can see that we can start adding blocks here, and we have all of the blocks available to us. That might not 100% be what we want in this case, because, for example, you would be able to add a page break, or you would be able to add the formatting, or is it the cover block, or things like that, which wouldn't really make sense in there, maybe. And so therefore, you're actually able to add some more props to the inner blocks up here to make it a bit more defined to what you actually want. So one thing you can do is use allowed blocks to basically whitelist blocks that you want to have displayed in there. And so, for example, if we would only want to allow 3 blocks in there, we could add core/heading and core/paragraph and maybe core/buttons. And basically whitelist those 3 block types. And then when we go back to the editor and add the blocks, we now only have those 3 blocks available for us to pick from. So that might be something that is interesting to you. And in the same way that you're adding core blocks here, you can also add your own or custom third-party blocks. Just instead of core, using your namespace or the namespace of the plugin that you want to use, and then the name of the block. And that way you can allow only whitelist a couple of blocks. And one other cool thing that might make this a bit more usable is adding a template to it. And templates are super powerful because you can either have them just as default content, or you can actually lock those templates, which, for example, if a client of you were building this block for a client, and you would always want it to have a title, a paragraph, and a button. But don't drill. There wouldn't be any case where that wouldn't be the markup in there. You could actually block that template, and then the inner blocks would not be able. You would not be able to add any, remove any, or move them around. But start with the template first, and you can lock that if you desire to do so. The way you do the template is just by adding an array, and then again in there doing another array for all of the different blocks that you want to have in there, and again starting with the title of the block or heading. And then you can, as a second parameter, you can add props to it. So you can already add predefined text to it. I don't think it's too necessary to add some things here now, but so you can just go ahead and add another paragraph. And then also a button. And when I save that and open it up in the editor, you will see that it automatically pre-populated it with the title, paragraph, and heading. So every time I add a card block, we automatically have those inner blocks shown there. So that might be a cool way to have some presets for it. And if we add the prop template block and set that to true, you won't be able to remove any of those or add any more blocks. But if we don't have the template block, then those will just be presets basically that you can remove and so on.
What about image?
Yeah, that if you would want to have another image in there.
No, how to add to template?
To the template currently.
Yes, it's here.
Would you want that image or another image?
For example, this one.
If you would allow the core image block and add, for example, an image in here into the template, you always have the ability to set some default values for all of the blocks. So I'm not 100% sure on the syntax myself there, but let's just quickly look at the GitHub repo again and go into the packages for the block editor and just quickly search for the inner blocks. Then we can see there's the template down here. Yeah, so for paragraph, yeah, it's just I can just set the attributes in an object down here, and I believe it's the set, and just add the URL like this as a string. So we have a predefined image, and that's also might actually be attributes and add it like this, and then have default values for the block. You can specify those in an object as the same parameter. The same goes for placeholder for the heading. So if in our heading up here we didn't want the right heading, but we wanted our own thing there, you could just add placeholder and set that to be card title, and then it would show up as the placeholder text there. That way we are able to control the inner blocks even more. Cool, and that is basically all the structural markup things that we want to have for our block. That is the actual block work mostly completed. what we are going to do now, and we have pretty much an hour left, is expanding on the block, kind of adding some more nice, adding something to the sidebar over here, and just adding an icon, adding some just cool things that you can add to make the block nicer to use. Starting out with, first of all, did everybody get to this point? Is everybody comfortable with what we currently have here, or are there any questions, any things that I should go over again from just what we have currently set up?
In my case, the whitelisting of blocks doesn't work. Like it let me do any other blocks that to put in there, like the allowed blocks.
Okay. What kind of block did you want to add for it?
No. Like I have this same like you have there, but when I click on add block, it just lets me add any kind of block, like even.
Okay. Can you, let's see, is it spelled correctly with add blocks with the S at the end?
Yeah. Oh no, S.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. Awesome. Then one thing that we can just quickly tackle is adding an icon to our block. And we do that the same way that we are doing down here in the toolbar button. We can just add an icon prop to our block, and again pull something from the dash icons. And in this case, let's have a look at the dash icons. If we go to that page and find something that we want to use, in this case, let's just go with I wasn't able to find any real car thing, but it might be something more useful. If we want to go with just listen. We just need to copy everything after the dash icon dash, and then just have that as the name of the icon. And again, we can reload it in the editor. Now we won't have that block up there, but we have our actual part. Another thing that's super powerful is adding different styles to your block. So the same way, then, for example, if you're using core, what's called a core button, you can see that over here you have those styles, and you can select from the outline style or the fill style, and that is something that can also change from over here. To add that to our block, there are 3 different ways of adding that. One is by just adding another prop to the block option, and that is called styles. And inside of there, we can have, we can just name it outline, and then add a label to it. That way. Every time, for example, I'm missing something or I'm not 100% sure, I can just go to the docs, and in the case of the block registration, if you want to find out what all of the different attributes are that, so I will close the tabs here. What all of the attributes are, we started with the mandatory ones, and now we're adding to them, and those are things that you might not use too terribly often, but you can go to the docs and to the designer and developer docs for developers in this case. And there's in the block API, I will also have a link for that in the wiki. you have the block registration. This is a place where they have all of the different properties that you can set, and they're all listed out here with examples, with again written description of what they're doing, and also for the icon specifying different background colors, making it more customized to what you want. And okay, yeah, these styles, my mistake, it was not an object, it was an array of the different styles, but yeah, so we have the array of different objects that have a name and then a label. And you can have as many as you want in there. And when I go back to the editor and reload, you will see that we have the styles over here, and now we have the outline. And the way that those styles are working is, if I apply the style in this case, you can see when I save that and just look at it on the front end, that it takes the name that we passed into the name that we gave our style, and it will add class to the wrapping element with is-style the name of whatever style we had. And that way, in our case, we just to look at the JavaScript files inside of the source folder, and every time you change a line of code, anytime you save that file, or any file that gets imported into that, then it will recompile everything, and the compiler will check for errors. And so if there's a typo somewhere where you're missing bracket, or if you used a variable that was not defined, or any of those things, then it will most of the time give you an error that actually prescriptively tells you, hey, on this line you're missing something, or this is undefined. So that is most of the time pretty helpful. Sometimes there are error messages where you just have to Google because it's some gibberish that, yeah.
So the compiler shows no errors, but the block has error load. So
Okay,
that's really
let's just see. And that's also one thing that I found to be really helpful when there are errors when you're in the editor and it's not working, is to open the web inspector and just to check the console, because most of the time there are helpful messages in the console as well, even if the compiler didn't have any problems. Oh, okay, so probably it was the thing, it's just dropped on there, and there should be the S as well. And it might be the same thing in the edit as well. Awesome. And then you can try whether it works or not. Works. The next part we want to tackle, now after we have our title up there, next thing would be the image. And for the image, first things first, we again want to have another attribute, because we also want to share that data and want it to be saved. And so in our attributes, right underneath the title, we can create an image. And in this case, the image has some more stuff beneath it, so we are adding object as the type. And then, again, you will notice that's the case for many things. Of course, there are many different ways of uploading an image, but one really nice way is the same way that the core image uses, is with using this placeholder that enables you to upload or use the media library to select your image. And the way we can use that is, again, by importing another thing from the block editor. And the component there is called media placeholder. Yeah, media placeholder. And yeah, we can use that component in there. And like with the rich text, if you want to find out all the different attributes that you can set for that, you can navigate to the GitHub repo for Gutenberg again and see what's available. In this case, I hopefully know what you want to have in there. There's the media placeholder can be used for multiple things. It can be used for PDFs, videos, images. In our case, we only want to have a single image be selectable. So
maybe you want to show it on the Gutenberg GitHub page, like the component itself?
Yeah, we did that for the rich text earlier and looked at that. And if we need anything else, I will go there again. But so we can tell it accept, and that will be an array of things that we're accepting. In this case, we're limiting it to only images. And then another thing is we can set whether it should accept multiple images, and we don't want that. We only want one. So just put false here. And then we also, again, same as for the rich text, we want to tell it what to do when we actually select an image. So on select, we can again pass a function to that, and we're getting again access to the new image and can set the attribute image with that new image. So set attributes image to be the new image. And on the front end of the page, so in the save method, we can just have an image tag. Or also from the attributes, the same way that we're getting the title, also take out the image. And then our image tag down here, we want to have the source. Let's see. To be equal to the image.url, and the alt to be equal to image.alt. And once we have that, we can go back to the editor and we will yeah, then now you can see when you're just loading the editor there, it won't load and it tells us an error that the image.url is not defined. That is something, of course, we want to use the image URL, but if the user hasn't selected an image yet, there is no URL there. It's just undefined. The image itself is undefined, and because the image is undefined, you can't access the URL of something that's undefined. And so we want to have a conditional in there. And the way that you can, there are basically two ways to write conditionals right inside of JSX, which is the React part down here. And there is, you can open the JavaScript so just curly brackets to open JavaScript, and you can use the double ampersand to check if the condition beforehand is true, it will execute what's after it. Otherwise, if that's false, it won't execute the next thing. So we want to check whether the image is truthy, so equals something true, has the value, and is not just undefined. And then we want to check whether the image URL also is true. And if both of those cases are correct, then we want to output that markup. Otherwise, it just doesn't return anything. And just while we are doing, oh yeah, I will.
Yes.
And now if we reload that, again we need to remove the block and insert a new. We can still edit our title and have the media, that we can select something from our media library. And it won't show up yet. That is something that we will do next. But if we update the block and look at it on the front end, we will have the image there. So we now created the ability to set an image, but the image does not yet show up in the editor, and we are not able to edit the image yet. Those are two things that we will do in a second. First things first, let's also add the image to the editor. So once we select the image, we will then get the actual image displayed in the editor as well. And for that, we can use the second type. I just talked about the conditionals. There's a second way of doing the conditionals, and that is by, again, checking with the ampersand for the image and the image URL. But instead of just returning one thing, we can add a question mark, and then that is basically an if-else statement. And it's called a ternary operator. And so after the question mark, the first thing that we put in here is the code that gets executed if the condition is true, and the thing after the two dots is what gets executed if it's false. So in our case, we would want to have the media placeholder if there is no image present, and the same way that we have in our save, the actual image if the image was set already. So just copying out the image from down there, putting it into the edit as well. And that is something that you will see all over the place in Gutenberg components, is that you have some piece of logic, some piece of state information, and if that piece of information is set, is true, then you will display one thing, otherwise you will display another thing. So that is super powerful to be able to just, depending on what's there, display one thing or another thing. And if we go back to our block, oh yeah, again, now that because we are using the image in our edit as well, we also need to get it out of the blocks. And now we can see that the image also shows up in the editor, and if we insert a new card block, you can see that we have the media picker again, can select an image, and it shows up here, and also on the front end, you can see that the image also is there. But we're not yet able to edit the image. So initially, after we set the image for the first time, there's no way for us to go back and edit that. That is the next piece of functionality that we will add. And the perfect spot for that functionality in my opinion, also when we look at just the way that the core image handles it, is to have a toolbar, and in that toolbar add a button that allows us to edit the image again. So the way that we're used, in order for us to use the toolbar, there are, again, you can see the pattern, are a couple of components that we can use. And some of them will be from a new package, just instead of the block editor, just add WordPress components. So import and the things that we want to import are, first of all, toolbar and the toolbar button. And one more thing we want to import from the block editor is a component called block controls. Awesome. The way that the block controls and the toolbar are working is they are basically portals. You can think of them as just portals where when you put something inside of that component as a child of that component, it takes everything that's in there and puts it into another spot in the editor. So for example, that is also a way that in a minute we will get something into the sidebar over here, is by using a component that acts sort of as a portal where you put something in there and it gets pulled out of the markup of your block and gets put into that sidebar, or in our case now, the toolbar. And one thing, we just need one small addition in order for us to do that. Inside of JSX, inside of the React, we only ever can have one wrapping component. So inside of our return statement here, there needs to be one wrapping element. So we can't just put another element, so the block controls up here. That would give us an error because now we have two elements that are on the same level. But React gives us something handy called fragments that are, they won't output anything to the DOM. They're just there to basically create a grouping thing, and you can use just empty tags, and those are fragments in React here. And that is, again, only because we need to have one wrapping element and can't just have multiple ones next to each other, just from the structure that it's done. And now we can use the block controls. Inside of the block controls, we use the toolbar. And again, you can just think of that as being a portal. We are portaling into the block controls, and inside of the block controls, we want to add a toolbar, and then we want to add something into that toolbar.
Certainly you're doing this in the edit?
Yeah, that's only in the edit. We won't need any of that in the save, because again, the save only generates the markup for the database, and the edit is concerned with the editing experience. Cool, and then we can add a toolbar button here. And the toolbar button takes a couple of arguments again, for example, an icon. And the name, if we can either, for the icon, provide it with an SVG, or we can just put a string of the name of a dash icon. So if you ever use the WordPress dash icons, the icons that are in the tutorial, you can just use the name without the dash icon in the beginning. And so for example, in this case, I think it's called edit, and just use it like this. and then when we reload the editor, we can see that we have an edit button up here now. And that doesn't do anything yet, we haven't wired that up, but with just that markup, we created a new toolbar button that has the edit icon and all that stuff. Does everybody got that? Okay.
Oh, at the bottom of the return, you have the
Yeah, just
greater than
close
less
it.
than. Oh, okay.
For this case, because we don't just want to toggle something or just use a function from us, what we want to do is open the media picker again. So the default WordPress media picker, we just want to open that UI. And in order for us to do that, we need to get another component, which is called, which is again from the block editor. It's called media upload. And that is something, the media upload basically is the media picker. And the way that it's working is we're putting that into our toolbar, the media upload component. And again, telling it the same things that we had for our media placeholder, so accept and multiple are the same thing. And also the onSelect is the same thing. And because we don't want to repeat ourselves and just have clean code where we can change it in one spot and not multiple, we can take that onSelect function out, create a new variable that's called onSelect image or something, and just store that function there and just use it in both places. Use it on the media upload and also on the media placeholders. And that just makes it a bit more maintainable because we're pulling the function out of there. But then there's one special thing about the media upload, because again, the media upload is the full media library, the full on thing to the media picker, and the thing the media upload gives us is a prop that we can call to open the media library, and that I will just it gives us basically a render prop, and in that prop we can it wants a function from us that it will pass its props to, and that function should return something again. And what that returns is the button or the markup that we want to use in order for it to open the upload picker. And it'll make more sense once we actually, in our case, we always want to look at the packages. And because in this case we're pulling from the block editor, we're now looking for the block editor folder here. And in there it's always just a source folder and then components. And that is something that just by looking at it you will find your way around that a bit easier. But there, all of the different components that you can use that are part of that package are just in there. And in our case, we're using the block the rich text component. So if we search for rich text, it's right down here. And then you have the documentation with all of the different properties and what they are listed here. And that is something that's always good to know where you're getting your stuff, information from, where you can kind of look and see what the component actually does. But in our case, the rich text first of all, we need to tell it what kind of HTML element it should look like. So in our case, it would be an H3. We can tell it that by putting the tag name prop on it. The tag name is just the name of the HTML element it should replicate. In our case, H3. The next thing we want to tell it is what the current value it should display is. We can do that by telling it the value. And again, when we want to not just put a string in there, but an actual JavaScript value, use the curly braces. And for that, we can put the props attributes type again. One more thing that we need to tell it is what to do when that value changes. Because at the moment we're telling, hey, this is the value, but of course we want to handle the change of the values. And we do that with the onChange property. And that property takes the function that will get the new input, the changed text. So just a function that takes the new string and the new title as an argument, and then we want to use a function that we also get passed in through the props, which is called setAttributes. So props setAttributes, and that again takes just an object with the title of the attribute that we want to change. So in our case title, and then what we want to change it into, which is the new title. Everybody following to that spot. Awesome. And then one final thing we need to change, because the rich text component provides us with a couple of more things. It also adds the ability that we can make text bold or italic, and that way we don't just want to put the string down there, we also want to use a rich text component down in our save function. So also replacing the H3 down there to make that a rich text .content in this case, and then also pass the tag name and the value to that. And we don't need to have the onChange, because in the editor it won't change, or in the save it won't change. But we just want to have the tag name and the value. When you have all of that in there, you should be able to navigate to your blog again, on your WordPress site, and the text should now be edited. You should be able to still have an H3 in there, edit that text. The text that you put in there should show up on the front end, and when you reload the editor, it should still be there and still be able to change. Everybody at the point where that is working, you can edit the content and save it and all of that.
Yes.
Is it also working now? Or?
We
We can try to troubleshoot that.
It's working now, but
Okay.
we haven't finished the writing yet.
Okay.
The step.
How does everybody feel with that? Does it make sense, or are there any questions in regards to, for example, the set attributes or what the attributes are doing, any of that, or is that clear? Because we will be doing more with that in a minute, but I just want to make sure that that foundation, how to change data and so on, makes sense to everybody.
Language.
Yeah. Awesome. Then, sure, yeah.
For me, it's not showing on the like on the site for some reason.
Okay.
So I have
Then, one thing we can do to make everything a bit more maintainable, you can see we several times we're using multiple items out of the props, and that is a bit easier if we deconstruct those things and don't have to write out props dot and so on every time. And we can do that by with that syntax, where we can put, for example, these set attributes and then the attributes in there. And then we can remove the props from that and just call that function. Basically, all that does is it's similar than if we were to type just set attributes equals props dot set attributes.
Yeah.
And that is the same thing, just in shorter syntax. And that is also what we're doing up here when we're importing. We're basically getting multiple items and we're only just pulling one out. So we're doing the same deconstruction than what we are doing down here. And we can even nest things, so instead of always having to write out attributes, we can even, again, nest that and just pull out the type.
That may be the same.
Then do the same thing in the save. Instead of, we can remove the set attributes because we won't need that in the save or
Can we come into this? Into some browser?
There's one more thing, or there are a couple more things, but one really helpful thing that we're getting out of the props, and that is just class name, and the class name itself follows, that gets automatically generated by WordPress out of the namespace and the name of the block that we gave it. And the class name that gets generated is wp-blocks-namespace the name of the block. So in our case, it's wp-block-WordCamp Praha -card. And we can use that class name by just adding that again, like this. And that again, don't worry too much that the class name, it's because class is a keyword in JavaScript to actually use classes. You are not able to use just a class in here and it just gets renamed into class name. There are some other places where instead of 4 if you have a label, for example, and you put the for attribute on there, in this case it's HTML4, just so there are no collisions in namespace. Awesome. Next thing, because our final markup or our final result, we want to have that card. And for that, there's some markup that we want to have, and we can open the GitHub repo again that I shared at the very beginning. So the GitHub repo for this workshop.
It's good.
And in the wiki section in step 3, you can see basically because we want to have that card, that is the markup that we want to have at the end. So we want to have a wrapping div with the class of our block. We want to have header, div for the card header, div for the card media, and then just the card body itself. And now we just want to combine those two things, what we currently have, just the title, and put that inside of the card header, and then expand from there and fill the other things in. So I will just copy that markup over, and then replace all of the classes just using class name. And taking our rich text that we already have and putting that where the H3 currently lives. Just put that there. And also taking out the image and the some content, so we just have empty divs there for now, but we will fill them in together.
You have to tell Fabian if you should slow down.
Yeah.
Because he's really a quick typer. And he is.
So you're replacing everything that you wrote there with in the return?
Yeah.
In the edit part?
Yeah, in the edit and then also in the save. So I'm copying the rich text component, everything that we currently have inside of there. I'm copying that out and just putting that into the card header. And that's just to get the structural markup that we can style later, or that we have the styles pre-applied for.
So
this is only for the edit part?
That's only for the edit part, and one other thing that we don't need to have the class name for the wrapping. The hard-coded, we can take out the class name that we had on our rich text component and use that up there. So we are using the generated class name on our outermost div, so we just have that block basically. And then we're doing the same thing for the save method, just removing the onChange on the rich text and adding the dot content there again. So just taking what we have down here and putting that into the markup the same way. Here. So that is the save portion.
Can I have a question? I gave a error that the class name is not defined.
Okay, did you import or did you also in the save do the deconstructing to get the class name out of the box like this?
Yes, I think. Yeah.
Because you need to have that deconstruction of the class name both in the save and in the edit function. You need to have that in both places.
Yeah, I forgot to save.
I will quickly come over.
No, it's okay.
Oh, it is.
I forgot in save. I
Okay,
only
awesome.
edit.
Cool. Then one thing that we can quickly change, so just so the styles apply, in the styles that we've pre-prepared, it was not WordPress proc-card for the name of the block, it was card block. So if we add the card, just rename that there, then we will get the correct class name and all the pre-written styles will apply. That is just when we reload the page and add the card.
Where are those signs?
They were in the initial repository. So if you go to the repository github.com/Fabian Kägy/
Okay.
that, and there's the editor.css and the style.css.
Alright.
You can just copy those out, and they're just
Alright.
so it looks a bit nicer. And you don't have to. And if I insert that block now, you can see that there is some styling, and when I load it on the front end as well, and just inspect that for a second and look at what we actually have on the page, you will see that there's the markup that we have written on there. That is just the card block, the card header that has page 3 in it, and that is what gets output by the rich text. And that is what gets saved in the database. Everybody have that it's working that way? That we're at that.
Blockers encountered an error.
Okay, then when you encounter an error somewhere, you can always go to your terminal, and down here where everything's green for me at the moment, if for example I was missing the curly brace, or the curly brace here, I would be getting a whole bunch of gibberish, but then also error where it is, and then also what line it is on, and telling me, hey, there's something wrong there. Is there something for you currently?
Yeah.
An error for the top after copying the code. It says line 31. He wants closing brackets. I don't know why.
So from copy what's in the read?
In the
Yeah, there's missing bracket.
Wiki.
Like he copied the added Are
There's a missing bracket on change.
on change.
Yeah, there should be one more, correct, yeah. So just add one column
Okay.
place here and I will edit that. Change. There, one more. Should be corrected now.
This is all here.
Cool.
So the node you're like in the terminal, that's showing. I never used this before. How does this work? So it's looking at that folder and it's checking to make sure that
Yeah,
the code is good. Or?
the npm start command,
Yeah.
it uses a program called Webpack.
Uh-huh.
Cool. And then when you have everything copied, you can just open the index.js file and we'll go from there.
So we should copy the styles in the editor.
Yeah, the style.css and put that into style CSS and then the editor into the editor. And then what we can also do is open up the local install that we have for WordPress and go to our plugins and activate the plugin, because that is something that happens all the time, that you're trying to load the block and haven't activated the plugin yet. Make sure to activate that first so we're ready to go there. Awesome. First things first, now we will start with the actual Gutenberg development part of this.
When you also download the Gutenberg plugin, or don't we need it?
Yeah.
We don't need
Yeah.
it.
But that is something that
For development, might be interesting for you to download Gutenberg, the Gutenberg plugin, and activate it to test out like future development.
that is something that the version of the Gutenberg editor that ships with the current version of WordPress always is a couple of versions behind the feature plugin called Gutenberg. And so there are things like, I know they just integrated a new media replace workflow and things like that that are already in the plugin but not in core yet. And that is something that is sometimes interesting to see what's coming up. So also the version of the Gutenberg plugin is what's currently in the GitHub in the docs, and so that is sometimes interesting to look at. But for this, we'll just work with what's in core currently and go from there. Cool. Everybody have that index.js file open and ready to go? Like I mentioned earlier, everything is kind of set up in different packages that WordPress provides for us. And for example, we now want to register our new block. And for that, we need a function that's called register block type. And that is part of the WP blocks package. And the way that we import that is just by typing import curly braces, and I'll explain more what those are, what that does in a second, but import register block type from add WordPress blocks. calling that function, and what that function takes 2 arguments, again, similar to the PHP side of things. It first takes the name of the block, and that name also needs to have the namespace first, and then the name of the block. And in our case, to match the styles again, it's WordCamp Praha -card. And then the second argument is an object that has a couple of properties on it that are required. There are many more that you can set, and that we, depending on how much time we have left at the end, we'll explore some more, and I'll show you some spots where you can find all of the different attributes that are available. But one required one, for example, is the title, and that is the title that will be shown when you select the block. And in our case, it's just card or something. Then another thing that every block needs is a category. And for the category, those are when you are in the editor and click on the append block button, you can see there's common blocks, layout blocks, and those different categories. And that is what we're specifying here. And for now, we will just use the common category. Yeah, and then two more mandatory things are an edit and the edit and save both are functions. So you put functions in there, and yeah, let's just put them there, and then I'll explain what we're doing. And if you've never seen that syntax before, don't worry too much about it. I will go into what's happening. But the edit and save is the way that the editor, basically the edit function gets called by Gutenberg to create the React code, the just markup that gets run in the editor. That is what you're interacting with, where you're making the text fields that are editable and all of those things. And then the save function only generates the actual HTML markup that will get saved into the post content. And so that is the difference there. For example, if you have an image and you want to have the experience that you can edit the image and all of that code lives inside of the edit method, and just the image tag itself lives in the save function. Yeah, that is just the differentiation. And one thing that was something that I struggled with in the very beginning, the save function really only generates HTML markup. So it's not, you're not using, because you're using React code here and writing React code here, that doesn't mean you're using React on the front end of the site. That React code and JavaScript code is only executed in the editor to create a string of HTML markup that then gets saved into the database. And so there's no JavaScript and React running up when you load it in your theme or anything. On the front end of the site, it's only the HTML markup that gets output by this. And if you want React on the front end, you will need to do that separately. But that is totally split up, and that was something that in the very beginning I tried to put React components into the save. I was wondering on the front end of the site why the React code wasn't loading, but it's only there to create the markup. And that is, it's only the editing experience itself. You're only building what's inside of Toolbar, and then that just the way that it worked in the old editor just saves raw HTML into the post content. And we will see, once we will look at what actually
if you look in the actual post content database, in the database field, then you'll see the HTML that's created by the function in the editor.
Exactly, yeah. Cool. And just to get started, we will just put, and don't worry too much about the syntax of JSX, which is the React part of things. Basically, just think of it as HTML with, instead of class, writing class name, because class is a reserved word. But in our case here, let's just put an H3 or something in there and say rock or something, and also put that into the C. And then if everything's working correctly, you should be able to navigate to just create a new post or a new page, and when you see that it's still everything green down there, you should be able to navigate to the editor and click on the plus button, and the card block itself should show up. You should be able to enter that, and it should just create the card, and then it just says hello Prague. You won't be able to edit that, but just publish that page, and you can also see that on the front end it also says hello Prague on page 3. And that is basically all the setup required from Gutenberg side to have a block up and running. And everything from there is just expanding that, adding more components. But the structure of running code, of creating your first block, that's it. That's all you need to get started to just create a block. And to visualize the difference between the edit and save, let's just, I will not have the save string in the edit and save, I will hello Prague front end. And when we reload the page on the editor, you will see that it contains invalid, unexpected content, and that is something that we can deal with later, but just for now, delete that block. We've changed something on the save, so now it was expecting the string to be front end, and it was still the old string from the last time we saved. So if we enter it again, you can see that it's hello Prague here, reload the page, and hello Prague front end. So the edit and save are fully decoupled, and what you have in one is not in itself on the other side. You need to work on that. And that is something that we will do next, how to share states, how to share data between the edit and save version of it.
Question?
Yeah.
Is there any reference from that index PHP file to that block? I mean, that the index PHP file knows which block to.
Yeah, that is
build everything which is in that folder.
That is so what we are doing in this case, and we were only concerned with having a plugin that has one block in it, we have inside of our index PHP, we are registering just that one index build index.js file, and that could have multiple blocks in there. It wouldn't really matter in this case. It's something when you look at the documentation for WordPress scripts, you can see that the build command here has, you can have, instead of just the WP script build, you can pass it multiple entry points. So for example, if you had block 1, block 2, block 3, and wanted to really enqueue them separately, you could create multiple entry files. So instead of index.js, which is the default entry point, create block, card block, and then make that an entry point that would output another JS file. And then just registering the JavaScript for each individual block and so on. Everybody at the place where you can insert your block and cool. Then, now we only have static content, of course. The next thing we will want to do is make that content editable. And in order for the content to be editable, we need to have some sort of state information, some sort of data store where we can share data between the edit and save method. So because if you are changing something here, you need to save that information somewhere to also display it on here. And that is, if you've ever heard of state in React or tools like that, that is something that inside of Gutenberg is called attributes. That is another property that we can just put into our block setup. And so we are creating the attributes, and inside of there we can create objects for all of the individual items that we have. In our case, it will be a title. And that title so we're creating an object with all of the different attributes that we have, and are giving every attribute, in this case we're starting just with the title, a name, and then we just need to give it a type as well. And the way that we get access to that, like I mentioned earlier, the edit and save, those are both functions. And WordPress automatically passes one argument to our function, which is a collection of things, just one object, which we can just call props. And there are multiple things that are in those props, like, for example, the attributes or a function with which you can set those attributes, and we will look at that now. One other thing we need to change is with the syntax down here, when you, with the arrow functions, you can write them in two ways. Either you have the curly braces around them, then you need to explicitly return something from it. Otherwise, if you don't have the curly braces around it, it automatically returns what's in there. And now that we have the props and we want to have some more things going on in there, we can add the curly braces around them and just return that everything in there. Just do that for the save as well. Awesome. And
we're the only one where it's not working.
Then the way that we get access to the title is by inside of our markup. Every time we want to go back to writing JavaScript code, the way we would in PHP to open the PHP tags again is just by opening curly braces, and then everything in here is JavaScript again. You can't do everything from JavaScript in here, but you can do expressions, so things that directly execute. And in our case, we can just put props dot attributes dot title, and that way we are directly accessing the content there. Just do the same thing down there in our history. But now the thing is, with that setup, we're reading the title, but we never set the title and we never make that editable in any form or shape. And that is something where we will need another component. Of course, there are multiple different ways to set that, but one of the ways that Gutenberg and WordPress provides us with to make HTML elements editable, just to make the content inside of, for example, this H3 editable, is by using a component called rich text. And that component is part of the WordPress block editor component. So the way we import that is, again, import rich text from WordPress block editor. And then we can replace our H3 with the rich text component. And yeah, then the rich text component itself takes a couple of arguments. And that is one thing, perfect spot where we can quickly look at how, for example, I, of course, now know the different attributes, but for all of you, the way that you would find out something like that, something maybe to see how the rich text works, is through the documentation. And I myself prefer going directly through the GitHub documentation, through the GitHub repo, and that is just if you open github.com/WordPress/Gutenberg, that is the repo where all of the development for the Gutenberg plugin itself is happening, and also where all of the markdown files and everything for the documentation are also in there. And so that is why the documentation in here always is a bit ahead of the documentation that's just on the WordPress.com website. WordPress.org, sorry. You can see there are several folders.
Oh, what's the NPM? The NPM.
NPM is short for Node Package Manager. It's just the JavaScript package manager.
Yeah.
No, you
yes. Okay. Yeah. Then. So we have that here.
What's that front copy this into your file?
Is the install working for everybody else or
anything?
I got it.
Okay, I'll have to look in a second. We'll go over that and just make sure. And no worries, we have about an hour planned for setup to get started because there's always something that takes a little time. What was the error that you gave?
It was
first the deprecation.
invalid dependency. That was the obvious.
Sounds working. Okay. So you don't have to add in a notice
how you could save that file. You can try that. If not, let's see what versions of NPM you have installed, just the no version or NPM. Okay, then you can NPM basically just to the version. Let's see what what was the version that you had? 6.4. Okay, 6.2. Six point four. Then
And I guess, yeah, because this then.
Yeah, we have only that, so we were afraid of maybe out there, so should we try it? I can come and help you.
I think what we should try is updating NPM. Yeah. It looks like that is something. Maybe. Yeah, you can try that or just even I will just.
So if anybody is bored, you can of course continue to install a setup process. Printing down on the GitHub repo.
Let's see what version of NPM you have installed. It's just npm-y. Okay, that is okay.
Let's try.
Yeah, maybe we can sure try yarn if that works, and otherwise maybe updating the Git scripts. Yeah. Have you used yarn before? Okay, then because I wasn't sure whether you were starting these scripts in the same way. I really used it too much, but yeah. Oh, it's okay. Awesome. Thanks. Cool. And how about everybody else? How is the installer going? What is this? That it's duplicated. Yeah, that is one thing that probably all of you had gotten in the installation process at one point, was a warning that one thing or a couple of things were deprecated, and that is something that good NPM package does. The WordPress script package itself has many sub-dependencies, and many of those also have sub-dependencies themselves. And somewhere in that chain, there might be plugins that, like in this case, are getting deprecated, and that is something that the WordPress team will take care of, the people who are working on the actual WordPress scripts package, and then make updates for the WordPress scripts package that use newer versions of that. So those deprecation warnings are something that might happen at some point, because just something in the long chain of dependencies updates, but that's just one of the reasons to make sure to update WordPress scripts and use the newer version there, and therefore you only have to manage that one dependency instead of all of those hundreds.
Where do we have to install Node on the PC?
Yeah. There is, you downloaded it from
Node.js.
Yeah, and I think they have a pretty good description of where it should be building on their
Web page.
or just Google.
Getting started.
I think that's already there once it's installed. Just Google and install new Windows. And,
A little bit more complicated.
And thank you all for being so patient in the installation project. It's always, especially when many people have different setups, that always takes a bit. But once we have that installed, we are all ready to get rolling and really get something, really working something. So who is still battling the download and who are still working with it? Everybody else here has everything installed? Okay. So you are inside? Okay, cool. And there, who was at this side that was still? Yeah.
Give up the second one down from the first one and second.
Okay.
I know how to avoid that and can do that.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So, or are you? So you don't have to go to the URL because we copied all the so you go to your package JSON and you copy this and put it into your editor. Do we have it here already?
You also need to install it here.
Okay.
That should
Yeah, do it.
You're not typing in the. And that is one thing that also, when you click on the link that I shared or that we've shared from the NPM repository, there's a list of all of those scripts, what each of them does within description and how you can extend them. And that is just all of the different capabilities that WordPress scripts is giving to you, like the NPM's or WordPress script start command, which is basically using Webpack in watch mode and watches all your JavaScript files and automatically compiles everything for development. Or the build command that automatically creates the build files. And
Question: if I should rename the plugin, do I have to run the installation again? Or?
no, not for that. It's the only thing. The build process, what we will get into, you will need to rebuild that. But if you rename it, that's no problem.
So you replace this part?
Yeah, the empty scripts will be used with all of them. Thank you.
No copying, probably. No. It's okay. The Wi-Fi is quick, that's nice. So you copy this, okay, and to register the plugin, we create the PHP file. I think you have written plugins already. Yeah. Yeah. We decided not to go through the PHP register process to detail because we thought we saved time for our blog development. So we of course here we register the blog. See here. Here is the registering of the plugin. We call it Gutenberg Workshop. So this will show up on your
just in the plugin section.
In your plugin backend of WordPress.
And just at the beginning, is the font size okay for everybody? Is everybody able to see?
You can make it bigger if you want. It's better. I cannot say because I'm really blind, but only the bigger, the better. Yeah, but Tuesday's namespace.
So basically, there are a couple of different files that you need to enqueue in order for the blocks to work. There are, of course, the style sheets, and there are two of them. One for the editor, it only gets applied in the editor, and then one that gets applied both on the front end and in the editor. And the way that it works is we're not using WP enqueue styles or enqueue script to directly enqueue it, and we're only using register style and register script to register the handle. And then there's this one function that you can see at the bottom of the comment that is the register block type function. And that function basically takes two arguments. First, the name of the block namespace, so namespace dash the name of the block, which in our case is WordCamp Praha / card block. And if you want to get these styles applied, you need to have that name as well. Otherwise, of course, for your project, you can change that. And then you can see there's the second parameter is an array with named options, and you just pass the handle of the registered scripts and style into that.
Like we have card block styles here, so we put card block styles here.
And with that, because we're leaving the enqueuing process up to WordPress itself, everywhere the block will be used, they will enqueue everything automatically. And so we don't have to take care of making sure that this file only gets enqueued in the front end and this gets enqueued in the admin area as well. This is what the registered block type function also does for us. And yeah, because we figured that most of you had enqueued something before and just know the basic setup of a plugin. That is the one file besides the two styles that we can just copy over and then get started with the JavaScript process there.
And here's our block script inside, and it's like the build version of our block.
And one cool thing that we can mention here is, if you go, once you copied that entire block and put it into the once you have that in there, you can create a folder that is called SRC and put an index.js file in there. And that is the source JavaScript file that WordPress scripts will be looking for. That's the entry point for all of our JavaScript. And then everything that gets imported into there will be from the build process put into the index.js file inside the build folder. And one cool addition, because we're using WordPress scripts for it, is that it automatically takes all of the different dependencies. So all of the different components that we'll be using, all of the different functions that are provided by WordPress are split up into different packages. There's a package called WP Blocks that has the function to register it, and then just components, editor components, multiple different packages. And when you're importing them in your JavaScript, WordPress or the WordPress scripts package automatically generates a PHP file called index.assets.php that is basically an array with all of the dependency names that you would normally have to pass manually into the enqueue function. So one of the arguments for the enqueue function is the dependencies that need to be loaded in the edit or on the site before you before that script gets enqueued, and that gets handled automatically for you.
So this is very cool.
Yeah, and
you cannot forget anything, and you just choose what half, I don't know. So everything is handled automatically.
And I will show the content of that file in a second once we get started, so that makes a bit more sense what's happening there.
So everybody of you have copied the index.php content, created the source folder and the index.js.
And then once you have that, you can, in your terminal again, that has the plugin folder open, just run npm start. And then that is one breaking point where we'll make sure that everybody has that up and running. So you have some green text down there that says it's built correctly. And once you have that set up, then we're ready to go. That should be all the setup procedure.
Yeah, so I still create the style sheet files where we will copy the CSS only. So here is the source folder, index.js, editor CSS, and style CSS. And editor CSS and style CSS don't end up in source but in the root. Like 2 CSS files. So you can always follow along the workshop after the workshop. Because you can always look up this again. Okay, so once you've finished that, you can go to npm start and it will start the development. VS Code is really cool because it's like you can just right click, open terminal, and then you can end up writing the terminal. I also changed from PHP Storm to VS Code because React development is so much more convenient than VS Code.
And yeah, when you see the terminal, that is the output that you should be getting. Watching the files and some hash version, the time and build that. And can I just get a show of hands for everybody who is at that step? Just so. And for everybody who's not there, is there anything we can do to help? Or,
You can get the styles from the repo.
And just copy them over into the editor, the CSS, and the style CSS. Okay.
Setup.
You would be able to, if you would want to navigate and folder up, just use 2 dots and then it would go one folder up and work from there. But just import the file from there and just tell it that the edit is imported from here, the save is imported from there. And that way you have kind of separate your concerns. You have all of these settings in one block, and then all of, or yeah, those things, and then all of the editing functionality in one file, and all of the save stuff in another. Just one thing to make sure, if you're using components like block controls and stuff, you can't just import that in the index file. You need to import that in each file where you're using it. So inside of our edit file, we need basically all of the components, and inside of the save file, we only need the inner blocks in the rich text component. That way we have split it out into different files and made it a bit more clear, and can also remove a bunch of the imports up in our index file. So that is just also something that you can just makes it a bit more maintainable, a bit nicer. Let's see, we have another couple of minutes there. One thing that all of you have seen during the process is every time I change something in the save function, every time I, for example, add a class here, and we go back to the editor, it tells us this block contains unexpected or invalid content. And if we go into the console and see what's going on there, it tells us the expected attribute of class expected that value, but only saw that value, and that's why it's throwing an error. So it's looking like it has been altered in some way, and then we're getting some more info here. This is the content generated by the save function, and this is what the content that got retrieved out of the post content, and there's a mismatch there. It's just comparing. Basically, the way you can think of it is the React code only gets run inside of the editor, and then once you save the post, it takes just the raw HTML markup that got generated and saves that into the database. And the next time you open the editor, it just reads that string of HTML markup and tries, because of the way that you have specified, hey, this element is a typo, it tries to work its way backward from, hey, this is my string, and inside of my save function I can see that the title should be in an h3 inside of a div called with the class header name. And so it's trying to parse all of the different attributes back out and then populate the attributes again for you, and then reinitialize everything. So every single time you reload the editor and go back to the editor, it reads everything from the just plain HTML and puts it into the block again and kind of rehydrates that block. But when you change something there, it doesn't know what to do, because it stored information that it can find or it's now looking for the title in H3 with that class, but there's an additional class here. And so it's just, those are things that are throwing it off. And the way that you can handle those things is by using deprecations inside of your block. So if I go to the or report and go to the docs again for the designers developers or block API, there's the block deprecation. And that is another prop that you can use in the block registration, is you can add deprecated as a prop, and that is an array. And in there, and I quite like to pull that out into a separate file as well, to have all of the deprecations, all of the different versions of your blog in a separate file again. But in there, you can, here's next version, is you can see in the deprecated, you're basically putting the old version of the markup. So the full save function and attributes and everything from earlier in there. And because we only did a small markup change, we could just basically all you would need to have in here is the save, and then use the old version of the save function. So before you made the change, and have that in there. If you now at some point decided, hey, I want to change the name of the title attribute to blog title or something, then there are many different options which would really blow through. We could have a whole workshop on that, but you could use that migrate and migrate the text attribute to now, be named content, or just transform all of the different values. But just for markup changes like changing an H2 to an H3 or something, stuff like that, you can just add the old version to the deprecated array, and then just change it for your new version, and then it'll try to parse first with the new version of your block, so the current save function, and then if that generates an error, it'll try the different deprecations. And if one of those works, then it'll know, okay, it used to look like this. With this, I'm rehydrating all my attributes, and then I can take those out and populate my new save function. And then it automatically gets updated. So the next time the markup will get updated to the new version for that. And that is just something.
But you do have to do it manually.
Yeah, you do have to do it manually for when you're. That is one thing. If you have updates for that, you need to always do that manually. That is why some people are deciding to build their blocks dynamically. They're called dynamic blocks when you don't generate the content that gets rendered and that gets saved into post content by using JavaScript. You can also use PHP for that. And that is something that inside of our index.js file, where we have the registered block type. We can also, again, like we have to edit in a few different files here, we can have a render callback. And we can specify a function, a PHP function that we want to be executed, and that way we can just return just nothing here, return null, just leave off the save function, then only handle the edit experience from within JavaScript, but don't save anything, and then only saves basically HTML comments, and those get read out in PHP, and you can render the block in PHP, but then you have to basically build it twice, once in PHP and once in JavaScript. And here you're doing it also twice with the edit and save method, but those are just two ways. And again, those deprecations can be prevented when rendering it out using PHP, and that is just personal preference, however you approach it. Cool. Then, are there any other things that you have ever encountered that you would like us to go through, or that you just would love me to go over once more, or just questions in general, things that were not so clear, or paper or anything. Because that's pretty much, currently that is what we had set up. Now,
can you use the render callback, what you just mentioned, to render it in the editor?
Not directly, because again, in the editor, you would want to have multiple, you would want to be able to edit the content, all of that. One thing you can do is, there is a component called server-side render, and that is also part of the block components, and I will, I can open it. And the And for that, the server-side render component, you can put it in there, tell it all of the different attributes, and then it will take the render callback and render the actual block output, but you won't be able to change anything in there, so all your settings, like for example the title, you would just need to have an input field in the sidebar somewhere. And then you won't have the full rich text editing experience. You would only have an input field somewhere in the sidebar, and then it would generate the block that way. And one example of doing that is the latest posts, for example, here. That is using the server-side render component under the hood. So it is, you're not able to change any of the content in here. That only renders what gets output from PHP. And you're able to make all the settings in the sidebar and do the stuff there. Just post date, all of those things. And one spot where it makes sense to always use the render callback, create the output dynamically in PHP, are things like when you want to display all the latest posts or stuff in custom post types, data that can have changed since the last time you edited the block. Because again, the block only saves static HTML. So if you were to, for example, this list of posts, that block, if you wanted to recreate that and saved all of the current latest block posts using JavaScript, then it would only save the raw HTML, but if you created a new post, that wouldn't get updated. It would only get updated the next time you open the editor and update the post. So for all those cases where you're working with dynamic content, those are cases where you need to use the render callback and need to render it out using PHP.
Also refer to the deprecated version, like when you add it later on, your client has some changes and they want another field or they want some extra stuff in it. As soon as you develop your block, all the other blocks your client already used on other pages will get deprecated. So you can add a deprecated function here.
Yeah, I think we did that right when
you did it already?
We went over it. Yeah.
Okay, so slightly earlier.
Yeah, but that is something that. Any other things, questions, or you want to talk about?
And if we use the render callback to PHP version, how we retrieve the data from the...
Yeah, that, let's just, I think I have an example open somewhere. Or let's go to this might be next. this is a case where it was built using the render callbacks, and I have the source for blocks up here. And so, for example, in the boxes lines, there is an edit function that has some stuff in there, but the save function itself just returns null. And when we look at where the thing was registered, in the includes for the block, the boxes lines down there, it has yeah, for each of the blocks we have in the register block type we're putting the render callback function, and then that function in this case is just this boxes lines HTML, and we're getting, if we're using inner blocks, we're getting the content passed in as a second option, but we're getting all the attributes passed in as the first option. So we can just, by using attributes, square brackets title, in our case here, we would just get access to the title. That is something that WordPress does just for us to parses out the things from the HTML comments that will be stored, and it will store all the information in them, and then just put them, give them to us as the first parameter into the function that we put as the render callback. And that way, if you do it with the ob start and ob get clean, that way you can even just, and you might know more about those things than I do, as not being a good PHP developer myself, but just in this case we created a template folder where we just have the actual template and used the different attributes in there, and just echoed them out there, and then just got the entire HTML from there and rendered that as the markup.
Okay. So I could take like the value from a custom field for that page and put it like a parameter to this function, and then get the output from like a different.
For this, you're getting all of the attributes that you set for the block, and then you just use those attributes to render pretty much whatever you want in PHP.
Okay.
Yeah. If you would want to get access to other post meta items or anything else, you would also be able to do that. Anything else? Any other things? How many of you are currently using Gutenberg for any client side or anything, or still all either pre 5.0 or using the classic or other page builders? So you're using it, or you're using?
I have one plugin where I used it dynamically, but I didn't manage very well to render it in the editor. So this is still something I'm working on.
Cool. And I would definitely look at the server-side render component, because that really makes it easy if you don't have. Yeah, you can go two routes. You can either fully rebuild the experience in the editor, and then have things like the rich text and those things in the actual content, so inline editing. Or the other option would be to just use the server-side render to actually render the markup from the PHP side, and then just set all of the different attributes that you would want through either the toolbar or through the sidebar.
Can I have a question a little bit off topic, maybe of this? I know this is about block rendering and block building,
but recently I've done some kind of decoupled website based on Gutenberg. And I was wondering if you're running Gutenberg on your server and you want to make a decoupled site, if you know about any way how to get clean content from the Gutenberg blocks. Because if you try to render Gutenberg blocks, you only get this kind of like very complicated structure with WordPress classes and so on.
Yeah,
and you know about some ways.
In the default way, you're only getting the full post content, and I know that we were doing something with. I'll have to look for that in a minute, but I know there was a plugin that actually exposed all of the different blocks as their own endpoints in the REST API. And so for a page, you wouldn't just get the post content, but you actually got all of the different blocks with all of the attributes as their own fields in the REST API.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% sure whether it was directly in the REST API or whether it was an extension for the WP GraphQL thing. I will look for that and also add a note to it in the wiki just to I know that we did something like that half a year ago or so, that the .is style outline, we added a big border so you can see what's going on. But that way you can add the different style variations to your block. And that is super powerful because with this way we added it to our own block. There's another way to add those, the same way than how we got access to the register block type function from the WP blocks. There's also a function called register block style. And for that function, we can just call that. And that, again, takes the name with the namespace of the block. So in our case, Word.
Yes, it's not here, it's for you personally.
And then the actual style variation, so again, just the name. With title. And that way, if we check back here, we should now have two styles. And the powerful thing here is that we're not just able to do that for our own block, but we're also able, for example, for the core button, we would also be able to add our own styles to that. And if I reload here and go to the button and go to the styles, you can now see that I have the style dotted over there as well. And so that is super helpful for when you're theming or when you're doing things like that, to be able to add your own styles to blocks from other people develop. And the cool thing, if you're more familiar, if you either are working in theme where you don't have all the JavaScript bundling, everything set up, there's even a PHP version of that, of the register block styles function. So you can use that function. I will just open the docs again for it. And for WordPress. Register block style, that is the JavaScript plate, and also unregistered styles. And then there is, not here. Oh. Yeah, that is the PHP version of doing the same thing. So we can specify any block and add a label, add a name. And we can also, that is something that we can do on the JavaScript side as well, we can add the inline style for it, or we can do it as the, so we can either just have the class or have inline styles applied for it. That is just something that's quite cool. That is also available to do in PHP, so you don't have to run all the JavaScript. But once you're already in the JavaScript, you can just choose whichever makes more sense to you in your specific case. Awesome. So that is, again, the block with the inner blocks, and now a style added to it. One more thing that we might want to add to it is if we click on the append image button up here, you can see for the paragraph or for the image heading, there's a nice preview next to it. And currently for our block, it just says no preview available. So one thing that we can do here is, again, it's another property that we can add that is called example. And for the example, if we just open that page with all of the different possible, that was designed, developers, block API and block registration, and just search for you can see you can specify default or example values for your attributes. And so in our case, we have the attribute title and we have the attribute image. And we can set attributes of the title to be equal to my cool title, and then just the image and the URL in there to be equal to, let's see, is that image? It's not good. If we just get an image from here, copy the image address, just to quickly show it over here, and use that, we can, if we reload the page on our block, we can see that we have title and those things already set up and have a nice preview for it. And you can expand on that and do things, whatever you want for all of the different attributes inside of the example. One other thing that might be interesting is we currently have the background color and the color of the text just set by default. But if we wanted to add an option for that, we can add something to the sidebar, which is a place that many different settings might be a good fit for many different settings. And again, for that, we can just use two more components. One is called the inspector controls. And that is just, again, like with the block controls and the toolbar, a portal to jump into the sidebar. So using the inspector controls, and then because we want to add some, make colors changeable, there's a component called panel color settings, and we can just import two of them. And the same way then that we use our block controls, we can now add the inspector controls just on the same level, and in there add our panel color settings. And if we think about what would make sense for our block, it would maybe make sense to have background color and then just a text color. And so again, we want to add those two to our attributes because we need to save them somewhere to share the data. And so the same way then we did for the title, let's add background color. and we just want to save the hex value for it, and so it's just type string. And then just copying that and making text color. And now we can actually use the panel color settings to make that changeable, to allow us to change them. With the panel color settings, we have a couple of options. We can set title, colors, settings, and and then there are the color settings, and the panel color setting component is there to handle multiple colors at once. So you can, it's the same component that is used when you, for example, want to change the color down here, where you have, in this case, it's only the one color, but yeah, down here for the button, we want to have the background color and the text color. And yeah, that is using the panel color setting. So that is what we want to achieve ourselves here. And with the color settings, that is just an array of all of the different color settings that we want to have, which in our case is 2. And so we're just passing 2 objects with all of them want to have a label. And yeah, we first want to do the background color. And then the value that should be displayed, and that should be, yeah, the background color. That again we need to deconstruct from our props up here. So the same way again here, background color, and we can also get the text color. Just to make it better readable now. Getting so long now. It's not nice. Yeah. And we want to tell it what the current value is, and then we also want to tell it what to do when the value changes. That again is the function that takes the new color and sets that using the set attributes. And then just set the background color to the background color. Okay. And then copy the same thing over for the text color, and just change the value and what we want to set it to the text color. So basically, for each of the colors that we want to be set, we pass it an object with the label, the value, and what to do when that value changes. And when we check to see what's there, we will see that we have our color settings in the sidebar for the background and for the text. And we can select those, and those will be saved. There's currently nothing that we're doing with them, but that's the next step. Now we just saved those values, and we want to use them. And the way we want to use those colors, it's a bit of a special case, but it's something that I wanted to show all of you. is we actually want to add them as inline styles. Because you could add a class name for it, but then, yeah, it's just a bit difficult how you would actually get access to the color value. But by using inline styles, because the color changes dynamically, the user is just able to select a custom color, and you wouldn't be able to just cover all that with class name or something. We want to add the color as inline style. And so the way that we can do that is by, on our main div, we can add a style property. The same way we would in HTML. The only difference being that it wants an object with all of the different CSS rules to be in camera case. So meaning, instead of writing background color that way, we are writing it that way. So just, that is one small difference. But that's basically all we're doing here, and then the same for color. And the background color, we want to set that to the background color from our attributes, and the color, we want to set that to the text color. And for that, we now have added them as inline styles. So if I go back into the editor, and let's change out of the, let's just add another default style that isn't the outline, so you don't have to see that all the time. Yeah, and I've just, because I don't want to see the outline version all the time, I added another style, which is just called standard, and we set it to be this default, so that won't generate a class, that's just the default style that allows the user to select between the multiple styles. So now the style, we go back to the standard again, we don't have that border. But with our background colors, coming back to that, we are now able to set the colors and also the text color. And if I actually inspect the element and see what's happening down there, there's a bit of gibberish markup that gets added from the editor itself. But if we just look at our div with the class name, you can see we have a style that saves the RGB value of the background color and then just the color. And that way, because we're just setting the color on the wrapping element, if, for example, in our part, in our core title that we have in our inner blocks, that block itself gives us the ability to change the color, and so we can override it from in here. So if we want to have that, it just sets the color to that for the block scope, but of course it can be overridden within. And with that, we should now just replicate that on the save side of things, because we currently, if we set the color here, go back, we haven't yet added that to the save part, so we can copy just the style up here. Again, also deconstruct the background color and the color out of the properties, and text color, and add the styles to our wrapping element as well. And then if we reload the editor, it will, because we changed something in save, that is something that we can look at. Support block, and there is. I'm missing curly. If I add the block again, and add background background color, color here, custom color. I just set that and that's down here. Just update that now. We should. Yeah, we don't have an image set yet, but yeah, it's showing up and all of that gets saved and we add an image. Super nice color combo here. Just yeah, you can see that it's working, that it's safe, and that you can just save values like that. A couple of more things we can do to make it a bit more maintainable. As you can see, we're at 177 lines just for our block. And one thing that you can see when you look at the way that the core blocks are built, and also you see it for many different plugins, is they don't just have everything inside of their index file. They're basically using the index file to generate to register the block, and then have a separate file for the save part of the block and a separate file for the edit part of the block. Just to also, again, you can always see, depending on what file you have opened, what context you're in, whether you're working on the editing experience or just what's being saved in the editor. And so we can just quickly do that, add 2 new files into the source directory, one called edit.js and one called save. And then inside of those, we do export, default, and then basically props. Basically, we're just exporting the function. We're exporting everything after that. And yeah, we can just go into our index file again and copy the entire edit part out. Just take that out and put it into here. And so you can see we still have everything from the edit just inside of that file. And then do the same thing for the save. And export default. And then, in order to get access to those, we can import them. Import edit from edit, and then do the same thing for save. And you can see with the // that just tells it, hey, import something from this directory.
There's no need to be shy. I think we have only 20 or 25 to 30 people registered, so the space is one.
Prosím, to prejmaj barevné značení.
Zelená, modrá, jsou vlastně podbarvený.
Jak se tady prosím tě počít dveře, mají tam, co tam če, nebo víš, jak to být?
Only open from the inside.
Only inside?
Yeah.
No!
You will be locked.
To nechalo, takže
To mě trochu zadrhl.
Tak on měl jako ten klíč od tebe, to budou stejný klíč od těch šaten.
Ne, ale třeba do kajpečka. To vezmu za tu. A nemůžu to, tak jsem čekal. Tady na ní nastavení, jo. Ale jak píšení, kdo napsání. Jo. Až na to co odejdu, to takhle. Tak, já kameru mám puštěnou.
Tady taky není, že? Jo, tady hlídám.
A potom, až se to naplní, tak budeš asi.
Já si tady budu, možná se na to podívám taky.
Jo, OK, tak jenom, tam mám kameru, těžší, to je jediný. Že to bude jako zaznamenávat, uvidíme, co z toho.
To je druhá kamera, tady nejde.
To jsou jejich, to je přímo jako, že si natáčí jasný workshop sami. To je naše, to tady jenom bude stát v rohu asi.
Nemám to kontrolovací.
No je jediný, občas, ne, karta je tam 64 GB na 8 hodin záznamu, 6 hodin záznamu a iba budu běží. A je to zapojený přímo do sítě. Takže jediný, co musí svítit červeně, to je jediný, takže to je. To je vše, děkuji.
Time. Maybe we can a little bit wait.
Yeah, I think the opening started late and maybe people will be there.
Yes. Dobrý den, máte registraci tady na workshop? Ahoj, ahoj, no, tak čau. Jdeme na jednu, tady stejné místo. A? Jo, super. Na workshopu se registruje? No, to nevadí. Dobrý den, prosím jméno, jestli tady jste zaregistrovat. Jo, super, tak si vyberte místo. Jo, dobrý den, jo, super.
Fyzicky tady vidíš.
No. Já mám tady celý seznam, ty máš kterou to nevím, Jako máš dost? Jo, to je málo. Bruno. To je problém. Tam jde zastavím tam to ladec. Myslím, že to je vytiště. Který? Jo, viděl jsem ho teda. No. Taky budu běhat.
We'll just be waiting another couple of minutes for everybody from over there to come over. But all of you can make sure that you're already on the WordCamp Wi-Fi and you have the login details on your card. So there's a password for the WordCamp Wi-Fi.
The password is WordPress.
Sounds good.
Ich mache eins zu die anderen Linien.
We'll go ahead and start the workshop, and if anybody else is joining us, just join in.
Yeah, welcome to the Gutenberg workshop. We are both of us our first time workshop colleagues with us, so bear with us, we're still beginners. We will guide you through some Gutenberg custom block development today. So yeah, you can start with the URL. You can have a look at the GitHub page of Fabian. We put a repository there where there is the finished
the finished example of the code, and just you can open that and then we can go over some things. What I would like to get from all of you is just a show of hands. How many of you are just WordPress developers, have worked with PHP or have worked with JavaScript before, and just kind of so we're getting a feel for your level, and then we can see how much we cover in each of the different sections.
Yeah.
So
anybody of you has developed before Gutenberg?
Okay, and anybody never touched code before? Cool. Awesome. Then, yeah, that.
And everybody has Node installed for the.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, and because we're the two of us in the setup process where we get Node and everything running, we'll make sure that if there are any problems for anybody, just raise your hand, and I think I will be coming to your computer and we can try to troubleshoot that so we can all go ahead and work with it.
Yeah, and we were thinking of introducing us later during the setup process because I think that might take time because we didn't know how fast the IDEs and everything works because, yeah. And should we also talk about development?
Oh, yeah, that is one thing. How many of you have something like MAMP or local by Flywheel or something for WordPress development locally on your computer?
Yeah, because we were thinking it's a little bit easier to set up our own page on your own local development page. Initially, we thought we would use the Docker image thing, but that is a little bit unstable. So we lost that set up during development times. So it's a little bit more easier and safe for you to use your own local development. So if you want to set that up. And hello, welcome.
And just to quickly go over what we'll be doing today. So we prepared kind of a card block that is made up of a title, an image, so just the workflow of replacing media inside of Gutenberg, and then some inner blocks that I'll explain, or we'll explain a bit more about that later, and then just some styling, and we'll see how far we get with that. But just some different stages to get started there.
Yeah, because we're thinking of what will maybe be useful to you on your next project. So we thought like some teaser style things would be like something everybody would want to use at some point.
Cool. And then, like we already said, Node installed and some local development is what would be awesome. And again, if there are any problems, yeah, just raise your hand. And also, if one of you is super fast and has everything figured out already, feel free to help out other people. And if you feel like it's
a workshop, so you can
it's awesome if all of you can interact with each other as well. If there are problems, if you can help out, that makes it a lot easier. Especially only two of us. Cool.
So you're from your computer, or you're just watching?
Cool. Awesome. So I had this the link for the GitHub repo that I will just open myself. We have prepared a repo with the final code in it, so that is what we will be building today. And at any point during the workshop, when you're lost with something, you can always go there and copy some things, check things, and we'll also, for the styling of the block itself, we won't be too much concerned with that in this workshop, so we will just copy out the styles that we have pre-prepared. And so make sure to just have that open in a tab somewhere. And also, when you go back to it the next week or sometime and have some questions you're not sure, and you click on the wiki up there, we have also written down everything that we're going to talk about in different steps, just so you can go back to that as a reference of what we did today and how you can do everything in written form. Do all of you have the GitHub open? Or should I put the URL a bit more? Cool. Then, next thing, everybody that has a local development setup, would be awesome if you could create just a page for that. So you just have a clean new WordPress install. And everybody who doesn't have one, just raise your hand and we can look at that.
Yeah.
So you have one installed? Yeah. Cool, awesome. Then here. First things first, because we're doing everything in a plugin today, we're going to create a new folder inside of the plugins directory that you can just call card block or whatever you feel like. And just create an empty folder there, and then we'll go from there.
So you can go to GitHub, like we have the setup procedure.
Yeah.
On the right side there is this navigation where you can go to the setup procedure. So when everybody has finished setting up their WordPress development, Yeah.
The link to this GitHub is.
It's like Fabian. Kägy is the username. Yeah.
Okay.
And in his homepage you will find the repository. You don't have to type the whole thing out. So and everybody has the local WordPress and the plugin folder. You could tell me. You only have to do the first two steps, so I'm waiting for you. So we can continue, or yep. Okay, then you open the terminal and you run npm init -y. And that will generate package JSON, and once you have finished that, install npm install WordPress scripts, big or even.
Yeah, and for that, for everybody who hasn't done anything with just npm or JavaScript development, what the npm init-y does, if you work with Composer or any other package manager, that basically initializes the package manager in that project, creates a file that stores all the information about what packages, about what things you're using in your project, and with the -y that just automatically fills out all the different fields. But if you leave that off, you can type in the name and all of those things separately. But you can always change those later inside of the package.json file. And then the second thing, the npm install at WordPress scripts, that is the WordPress scripts package itself is kind of a combination of things like, if you ever heard of Webpack, or just those bundlers that take the JavaScript and compile it into the ES5 that's run in the browser. Those are all things that before the WordPress scripts package was developed from the WordPress team, you basically had to manage something like 15 to 20 different packages on your own, and now it's all consolidated into that one package that has some cool things in it as well that we will go over once we get there.
Yeah, it's a good starting point to install that WordPress scripts.
I haven't worked with the terminals. I haven't worked with the tool.
Sure. There, you should be able to type cd and then just type the folder. CD space and then share. That is also something, depending on what code editor you will be using. We'll be using VS Code today, but depending on what you use, that might have an integrated terminal in it as well. And otherwise, that's, so if you copy that over, that should just paste it. And now you are inside of that folder, and then you should be able to run.
Thanks.
Sure. Can you open the package.json file? One second, that should be in the Sorry, we install within WordPress scripts and we install at WordPress scripts.